Hello and welcome back. So last week I did an early season team trends video, then an early season player trends video. Today we're looking at goaltending, and more specifically, we'll look at some advanced data from Moneypuck to help us identify goalies who are overperforming their team's defense, goalies who benefit from their team's D, as well as goalies you absolutely need to drop ASAP. And we'll also take a look at some buy low targets towards the end of the video. But to get started, what we'll be looking at today will help you evaluate potential waiver options, guys you can pick up off the wire before they take off, and it'll also help you with evaluating guys that are currently on your roster and whether or not you should drop them or if you should sell high on them at this point in time. This analysis will also give you a little bit more insight into what goes into the goaltending aggregated data categories. So essentially, you're going to look at goals saved above expected, a similar metric for high and low danger goals, and then some other metrics compared to the Yahoo goalie rankings for category leagues. And just a reminder, if you're in a points league with different weighting for wins and shutouts, for example, these trends are still useful. You just need to adapt them to your point weighting. So for example, if you get 5 points for a win and 5 points for a shutout, that's going to change a little bit how you approach this, but the information is still very useful to you regardless. Now, what you see here, this graph is a visualization I've done of Moneypuck's goals saved above expected. And for those of you new to advanced stats, this is a metric that takes into account the probability a shot has of becoming a goal based on factors like distance from the net, angle of the shot, type of the shot, and what happened before the shot. The goalies who are at the top of this list are saving more goals than they're expected to, and therefore they're playing extremely well relative to their defense. So what you see on the right is the current goalie rankings for Yahoo category leagues, and quickly just take a second to notice a few things. Number one, no Andrei Vasilevskiy. He was drafted as the number one goalie off the board at ADP 8.7, and this is one of the reasons why in the very first video and the most important video of the data draft strategy is to not draft a goalie in the first round. That is why. But if you did draft Shesterkin, he was the next goalie off the board, ADP 8.8. He is on this list, but he's 8th in the league, which is very good, of course. But he's already lost 38 positions of value compared to where you drafted him. From where he drafted him to where he is today, he went from 10 to 46 preseason rank. The ADP is a little bit worse. So had you drafted, for example, David Pastrnak with that 8th pick, Pasta was ADP 24.9. I got him in that range, and he's currently ranked number 3 on Yahoo. So essentially adding 21 positions of value. Now, just a quick reminder of why I suggest you don't draft a goalie in the first round. Take a look at some of these guys in the top 6. As we look at the top 6, 4 of them were preseason rank 135 or below. Husso, Thompson, Ullmark, and Hart were all late round picks. In my league, Hart was a waiver wire guy early on. I tried to get him, but Lake Mohawk Moose snapped him up. And he was higher on the waiver priority, so he got him, and that's been a huge benefit for his season thus far. But I did edge him out in a head-to-head matchup because I have a better offense, which is something that I highlighted on this channel in the draft series. Carter Hart is on an absolute tear, and I did make a case for him in my mock draft number 4 video, and in that segment, I highlighted that Carter Hart started hot last year as well. So as we take a look at what I said in that video, quote, "Not many positives in his data file. It was more of a gut play and banking on his elite talent level rather than what we saw last season with the data. But with the Tortorella bump, I view him as a very low name value but high upside play as your G3, and I mentioned him in my goalie targets video. G3 is where you can take some risk, especially when you've already got 2 guys off that elite G1 list that I showed you earlier in that particular video. If he struggles, dump him to the wire. If he starts hot, maybe look to trade him a few months in, which would have been the play last season." End quote. So that was from that mock draft number 4 video. And to be fair, I didn't recommend him to you all just because of the high risk nature of the previous 2 seasons and Philly as a whole. They didn't have Ryan Ellis. They had a number of injuries, Sean Couturier, etc. So I didn't necessarily, give him to you as a potential option, but the Tortorella bump did happen, and even more than that, Carter Hart is outperforming his defense. So if you look at him here, he's got a 15.95 goals saved above expected, which is outstanding. It's obviously 5 higher than the next highest guy, which is Connor Hellebuyck. Now, as of October 31st, when I did the team analysis, the Flyers ranked 5th in the league in goals against, but they currently rank 23rd in expected goals against. So the difference here is the skill of Carter Hart and his 15.95 goals saved above expected. He's currently 197 goals against and a 945 save percentage with 6 wins on the season, but the defense hasn't been great in general, and if you aren't 100% sold on the Flyers as a team, this month would be the perfect time to sell high on Carter Hart and try to parlay that into a more stable starter on a better defensive team for the playoff stretch. Now, the next guy on this list, Connor Hellebuyck, currently ranked 10th in fantasy overall. His 10.47 goals saved above expected is exactly what he does with that team. The Jets are never a great defensive team, and the only times they usually have success is when Hellebuyck is playing the way he is now. To be fair, the Jets are currently 8th in expected goals against, so a nice improvement over other seasons, but their expected goal differential is 12th worst, which means they aren't exactly getting the goal support for Hellebuyck right now. He will continue to get the start volume if you have him. There's nothing to scare you off of him because this is what he looks like when he won the Vezina and in all the previous good seasons that he's put up. Typically, he has a good year, then a down year, then a good year, and so on. And that trend has continued for a couple seasons, and it looks like this is a good year for him. So definitely stick with him if you have Hellebuyck. Now, as you see some of the names on this list, it's important to understand what we're talking about here. This is a list of goalies who are bailing out their defenses. So the team defense is allowing some quality scoring chances, but the goalies are at the top of this list are bailing them out. These goalies aren't necessarily the safest options for fantasy, but they are the hottest ones right now. But what about the opposite? What about goalies who are playing awful and are droppable? So what you see here is the opposite. It's goals saved below expected, and on the right is the ADP for goalies this year. So you see some interesting names on this list. Swayman, who's currently hurt, slightly underperforming when healthy. Francouz underperforming. Vitek Vanacek, despite underperforming based on this metric, is actually playing really well for the Devils. It's just the Devils are number 1 in the league in expected goals against right now because they're playing excellent defense. We'll come back to that in a further slide in this video. Vanacek is currently Yahoo rank 50, but could be in the top 20 if he were higher up on this list in terms of goals saved above expected. Now on this list, you also see all of my goalies. So Tristan Jarry, Jordan Binnington, Spencer Knight, those are the 3 I have. Knight's not playing that bad. He's actually outplaying Bobrovsky, which, shocker if you've been watching this channel. I'm not a huge Bobrovsky fan. And then you also see the guys that I drafted in Mackenzie Blackwood and Matt Murray. They're both on the IR right now, and I've already dropped Blackwood. So I do hit it out of the park quite a bit on this channel, but full disclosure, depth goaltending is my kryptonite. My thought process was pretty valid. The Devils are the best defensive team in the league, and I mentioned that in the video where I was trying to explain myself and why I picked Mackenzie Blackwood where I did. And the Leafs are 7th in expected goal differential, so that's a good sign for Matt Murray when he comes back as well. But both of these goalies were definitely injury prone when I drafted them, and therefore that added some risk that I had to take on just based on what happened in the goaltending in my draft. And I definitely did choose the wrong guy on each team. Got to admit when I'm wrong, that was definitely one that I got wrong, but I can't panic, just have to make adjustments and play the long game here. And that's something that I'm trying to stress in the Discord group is patience. You're trying to win the overall championship. You're not trying to win week 5. So you want to stay competitive and stay in the playoff hunt, but you're building your team for the playoffs to win head-to-head matchups. So that's something to keep in the back of your mind. Now, Freddie Anderson is on this list, and that surprises me a bit. So Carolina is 4th in expected goal differential. They are 2nd in expected goals against. So maybe they're just playing incredible D, and that's the reason he's letting in a few more than expected. But yeah, that's a little bit alarming. Jack Campbell is obviously struggling. We'll come back to him in a minute. But Marc-Andre Fleury is struggling as well. And at ADP 52.2, this is probably killing your team if you drafted him there. So let's take a look at it. Now, Fleury this year is 5-2-1, a good record, but awful stats with that negative 4.46 goals saved above expected. So he's well below his expected save or his expected goal number. Now, Minnesota is 4th in expected goals against, while Fleury is the 7th worst in the league in terms of wins above replacement. So not good news for Fleury owners. And I mentioned him in the weekly video on Sunday. 5 wins, which is every win that Minnesota has right now. Their backup hasn't gotten a win yet. But a 3.41 goals against and an 888 save percentage. So he's just not getting it done, nor is his backup Philip Gustafsson. Minnesota is 6th in the league in expected goal differential. So if Fleury can start making some of those saves, he and the Wild will absolutely start winning some games, and that could be a nice buy low opportunity on Fleury. If you look at the bottom left, last year Fleury was 0-5 in the month of October with a .463 goals against and an .872 save percentage. But then in November, a 5-4 record with Chicago nonetheless, a .212 goals against and a .935 save percentage. So he is capable of turning it around, and you could buy low on a starter on a team that should be contending for a playoff spot in the Central at the very least. And that could help you down the stretch and into your fantasy playoffs if they start turning it on later and they're trying to catch up. That's sort of that bubble team bonus that I mentioned in the goaltending video. One little interesting data nugget, he was unbelievable against Pacific Division teams, a .940 save percentage and a 2 goals against average, and that was with Chicago, or for most of that at least. So if you have him on your roster, maybe right now only start him against Pacific teams until the numbers start to improve. Could be a weird anomaly, but I did find that kind of interesting. It's something that you didn't see with a lot of other goaltenders. We will come back to Marc-Andre Fleury towards the end of the video, but for now, let's get back to the data. Below Fleury are the guys that you really have to worry about at this point in the season. Cal Peterson, though he wasn't drafted high, ADP 172, he is obviously droppable, and he isn't killing your team based on draft position and opportunity cost, but that's still not very good for a goalie that should have been trying to push for the #1 job in LA right now. The one who is probably killing you for those reasons is Thatcher Demko, ADP 57.2. And I was extremely high on him this year. I really wanted him in my league and I couldn't get him, but I guess at this point in the year, I'm glad I didn't. So Demko's record this year is awful. So Fleury looks like an upgrade by comparison. 1-6-1, 3.9 goals against, and an .879 save percentage is really bad for a guy you probably drafted in the 4th to 6th round as your G1. The troubling stat is that minus 6.79 goals saved above expected, which is indicative of his play as opposed to his defense. Now, Vancouver is 18th in the league in expected goals against, 24th in the league in expected goal differential. So there is a team element to this as well. All I'll say on this matter is this. Look at the monthly data at the bottom left. I drafted Demko last year and dropped him at the end of November. At the end of that month, that's when the coaching change happened. And right after that, he went ballistic. So 946 save percentage, 172 goals against, 7-1 in the month of December. He kept that going all the way through until basically March, where he kind of leveled out a little bit. But I gave up on him too early, and I doubt a coaching change is imminent this time around, but he's a guy that could single-handedly get his game in order and get the Canucks back into the mix. I would view this more as a wait-and-see approach if you wanted Demko and you couldn't draft him. Now would be the time for a lowball trade offer on him before he starts to pick it up. But if you have him on your team right now, I wouldn't dump him quite yet. I would wait and see because his numbers did drastically improve as the calendar turned to December. Now back at the list, Gibson is also playing horribly to start the year, but that is definitely more of a product of his team than his abilities. So Anaheim is #1 in the league in expected goals against in terms of being awful. So they're actually dead last in the league in terms of expected goals against at 53.61, and they're last in expected goal differential as well. So they aren't giving Gibson a chance, but regardless, he's unownable unless he gets traded. But that brings us to the undisputed king of awful goaltending this year, and that is Elvis Merzlikins. He was drafted ADP 155, so he's probably ruined your first 4 weeks of fantasy, but your season is still probably salvageable. But you should drop him immediately if you do have him. The question I have for some of these guys, including Merzlikins, is why? Why is this goals saved below expected so bad? Let's take a look at a different metric. So what you see here is low danger goal differential. And what this shows us is, wow, that goalie should have had that one, but in numerical form. So these are low danger opportunities that have gone in, and in this graph, you don't see John Gibson anymore because he's actually playing okay. But Merzlikins is more than double the next lowest goalie in this metric. And this low danger metric is important. According to Steve Valiquette at ClearSight Analytics, if your goalie gives up just one low danger goal against and the other team's goalie doesn't, you now have an 86% chance of losing the game. So that's alarming. And it's also a bit alarming to see Igor Shesterkin on this list. For me personally, I don't like seeing Spencer Knight either. But his sample size is only 5 games, so maybe a bad goal or two is contributing to that. But nonetheless, these guys are letting in some weaker goals, and nobody's doing it more than Elvis Merzlikins. Nedeljkovic not off to a great start. Dan Vladar's not really a great goaltender, in my opinion. I did give him out in the Week 5 video. I probably should have just left him off that. I'm not a huge fan. Cal Peterson, we see him on this list, and that probably explains his goals saved below expected. Stolarz is really good at high danger chances, but also pretty bad at low danger chances as well. Shesterkin, that could just be a little bit of early season struggles. The team hasn't been playing completely up to their standards. They're not bad at all, but they're not, on top of their game like they were last year. And here you see Vasilevsky on this list as well, which is a little bit concerning. But as we look at this is the exact opposite of what we just saw. High danger expected goals versus how many goals the goalie let in on high danger chances. So the differential between what they're supposed to give up on high danger chances and what they actually gave up. And on this list, Karel Vejmelka is at the top of this list for basically 2 reasons. Number 1, he's getting shelled every night. So Arizona is 7th worst in the league in allowing high danger chances this year, and they're averaging 37 shots against per game, which is 2nd worst in the league behind Anaheim, who's giving up 40. So those are alarming numbers. If you have anybody that's playing for Arizona or Anaheim, you should probably drop them right now. You shouldn't have had them in the first place. But the next concerning thing is Philly. Philly is 3rd worst in shots against per game at 36.45, and that's a bit concerning because they're asking a lot of Carter Hart, who you see 2nd on this list. So Hart is getting it done, and he ranks 20th in category leagues in Yahoo, while Vejmelka is unownable at 520 Yahoo rank with a 372 goals against and a 901 save percentage. So this is the difference. Right now, Carter Hart with that goals saved above expected, and he's stopping a ton of high danger chances compared to what he's expected to save. But how long can he keep that up? If you don't think that this is sustainable, again, now is the time to sell high on Carter Hart. Now, we did see Shesterkin on that low danger goals list, but he kind of makes up for it here as he's 8th on the high danger goal differential with 3.09. So that's kind of going to balance it out. And you see Stolarz there. He was on that previous list as well. He's up here as well. So this is kind of, maybe a sample size anomaly. Stolarz hasn't played a ton of games. Shesterkin has played a couple of games, more than Stolarz at least. So hopefully Shesterkin can get it sorted out, but he's still the 8th best goalie in fantasy right now. So nothing, terribly wrong with Shesterkin in terms of fantasy value. And then as you look down this list, I mentioned Scott Wedgwood in the weekly video this week. That standard data is getting support from this metric as well, as he ranks 4th on high danger chances, which is a little bit surprising. But if you've watched him over the last 2 years, he is playing really, really good hockey. And he definitely came in for Ottinger and helped stabilize their goaltending this past week when Ottinger was down with injury. Now, it is again important to understand what this is telling us in regards to fantasy. You don't want goalies who are giving up a ton of low danger goals, as they don't have their game in order yet. You ideally do want goalies that are making saves on high danger chances like we see here. But this isn't the only thing to take into account. So let's take a look at a metric that I've come up with to help us with our goaltending decisions. So what you see here is goalies with a goal saved above expected above 0, meaning they're saving more goals than they should be, aka they're playing well. And then also their respective teams' high danger shots against, and that's sorted from top to bottom. So what you see in the color differentiation is the high danger shots against. So this is fewer high danger shots against, and this is more at the bottom. So obviously at the bottom, the Canadiens goaltenders are facing the most high danger shots. The goalies with below 0 goals saved above expected are filtered out. So we get a good idea of goalies who are playing well and playing behind defenses that are limiting high danger chances. So Husso is at the top of this list. And at the beginning of the season, I wasn't sure what to make of him going to a new team, one that wasn't great defensively last year, but he surprised me for sure. And he definitely looks like the best available option at this point in the season. Now, I've mentioned the Vegas goaltenders in the weekly videos, including the Week 5 video when I was talking about Bruce Cassidy and what he did with the Bruins. And therefore, you see Logan Thompson is number 2 on this list. Both Vegas goaltenders you will see in this and the upcoming slide. And then an interesting thing to note here is Thomas Greiss at number 3, and that indicates that St. Louis isn't giving up a ton of high danger chances, and they aren't. They're only giving up 66 on the year. They're 5th best in the league at suppressing high danger chances. But Jordan Binnington has a negative 2.03 high danger goal differential and a negative 3.36 goals saved below expected, indicating that he's not playing well enough. So I just grabbed Binnington off of waivers in my league, and it's a positive sign to see that St. Louis is playing well in front of him. So now I have to sit and wait for Binnington to find his game, and all he has to do is get to average or even in terms of goals saved above expected for that to pay off for me. Now you also see a few waiver options here. Antti Ranta, Craig Anderson, Kevin Lankinen, Martin Jones, Brian Elliott, Eric Shalgren. All of these guys play for teams that are limiting high danger chances against, which gives these guys a chance to perform for your fantasy team. And they're also saving more than they're expected to as well. So any of those guys should be on your radar for weekly or daily streaming options depending on matchup and scheduling. But the guys at the bottom are full of risk in that they're getting bombarded with high danger chances and they are currently saving more than expected, but the question is, how long can that remain the case? The Montreal goaltenders are basically a wad of chewed bubblegum plugging a hole in a dam right now, and it's only a matter of time before that dam breaks and they get shelled on a regular basis. So I would probably steer clear of Montreal goaltending at this point. And then here you see Cam Talbot. That sample size is extremely low. He just came back from injury. I would ignore that just for the lack of sample size, but it is noteworthy that Ottawa is giving up a ton of high danger chances, which I did expect in the preseason as they aren't the best defensive team. Now, I've been contemplating picking up Stuart Skinner based on his excellent raw numbers before last night. And as I mentioned in the Week 5 video, at that time he had a .210 goals against and a .944 save percentage with 2 wins. But after last night, those numbers are down to .262 goals against and .928 save percentage. And Edmonton is giving up a lot of high danger chances against. So maybe that isn't the best option, but it certainly is an upgrade over Jack Campbell. So if he is there on your wire, it is something to think about. And it's also worth noting that in the Week 5 video, I gave out 6 goalie streaming options, and 4 of them appear on this list. Martin Jones, Antti Ranta, Thomas Greiss, and Stuart Skinner. Skinner, the worst of the bunch, but the other 3 are in green territory. So that's a good sign that some of the guys that are playing this week that you could potentially have for this week that could help you are also being supported by this advanced data. Now, Darcy Kemper and Charlie Lindgren right next to each other. Where are they? Lost them. Right here at the bottom. They're getting a lot of high danger chances against, but they are holding up for now, and that's likely a product of all the injuries in Washington. So John Carlson will be back this week. That should help limit the chances against and hopefully stabilize their D a little bit, and that could bump them a little bit higher up this metric. And last but not least, this is the opposite of what we just saw. This is the goalies that are below 0 in goals saved above expected, and this is still ranked by high danger shots against. So what this should show you are guys who are at the top are playing behind good defenses. They just aren't playing up to their full potential yet. And the guys at the bottom are goalies you should probably stay away from as they're giving up more goals than expected and getting a ton of high danger chances against. So the Devils tandem at the top makes a lot of sense. The Devils are number 1 in the league right now in expected goals against, and Vegas is number 2, and you see Aiden Hill up there indicating that he could somehow play even better than he currently is right now. He's 5-0 with a .217 goals against and a .925 save percentage, ranked 57th in fantasy. So that seems sustainable at the very least if he can't improve on that. At least this indicates that that is sustainable. Now, at the other end of the graph, Anton Forsberg, Sergei Bobrovsky, Jack Campbell, John Gibson, Connor Ingram, Pavel Francouz, Thatcher Demko, etc. These are all guys that are extremely risky at this point in the year. They are saving fewer goals than expected, and their teams are giving up a lot of high danger chances against, which is a recipe for disaster. But it is worth mentioning that this doesn't show the goalies' goals saved above expected. It's just sorting by team high danger chances against, which means, for example, a guy like John Gibson at minus 6.85 goals saved above expected is a much worse option than a guy like Bobrovsky, who's only at minus 0.30. And so I didn't want to, filter in that part of the data as well and make this even more convoluted and harder to understand. But this is worth mentioning because not all of these guys at the bottom are created equal. Jordan Binnington, Marc-Andre Fleury, Cal Peterson, and Jonathan Quick, Jeremy Swayman, Freddie Anderson. These are all guys to look out for as potential buy low targets. Now, not every one of them will be a good buy low, but let's look at one more graph to see the buy low targets a little bit more clearly. So this graph is the same as the last one, but it adds a filter for goalies who aren't giving up a lot of low danger goals against. Obviously, goalies should save the easy shots, and if they can also stop the hard ones, or in this case, if their team is limiting the hard ones or the high danger chances, that gives the highest chance for success for your fantasy team, and you want to pick one of these guys up. So Vanacek and Hill are at the top. They're ranked 50 and 57 respectively in Yahoo category leagues. Gustafsson is ranked 492 and only 2% owned. So he is available in almost all leagues. He could potentially be a streaming option if Minnesota has a good week and if he can start to find his game. Obviously, he just came over from Ottawa, so maybe he's adjusting to the new defense, the new structure in Minnesota, so that's something to keep an eye on going forward. Jordan Binnington is ranked 381 in Yahoo, but is currently 76% owned, so maybe try to throw a lowball trade offer out there if you want him, and we've covered some of the data on Binnington, and we've also covered Fleury. Fleury was preseason ranked 65. He's now 456, and he's 95% owned. But I'd bet whoever owns him in your league is probably already thinking about trading him as it is, and you could probably throw them a lowball offer and try to ride this wave as he starts to find his game. But I don't want to get too far into the weeds and get you, get your eyes glazing over and having you start to fall asleep on me. So that's going to do it for this video. But if you made it this far in the video, I want to thank you again for watching and sticking with it. Make sure to like and subscribe. I also just started a Data Draft Instagram account at data_draft on Instagram. So be sure to follow me there. And as always, I'll see you in the next one.